Good morning. Welcome to today's hearing to consider a representation against the interim steps at the Star and Scorpion London W13 8RA. This meeting is heard virtually online. My name is Councillor Kelly. I will be chairing. I also have my colleagues Councillor Jamu and Councillor Ball. We are today's subcommittee to consider the representations. We also have Alison Luff, who is legal advisor to the subcommittee, and Mr. Jack Roberts, who is clerk to the subcommittee and will be minuting the meeting. In accordance with procedure, I will invite the premises to make representations and answer any questions, invite the police and other authorities to make their representations and answer any questions, and invite the parties to briefly sum up their respective cases. At the end of the hearing, the subcommittee, accompanied by the legal advisor and the committee clerk, will retire to consider its decision. Decision will be given at the end of the meeting and confirmed in writing as soon as possible. So we'd like to go to Mr. Duncan Craig on behalf of the applicant of the Star and Scorpion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start actually with something that isn't necessarily central to the submissions I'm going to make, but I think it's important that I do. I'm referring to the statement that was served yesterday by the Metropolitan Police Service that made reference to the staff at the premises on the night in question. And occasionally I find myself in situations like this calling my brother, who is he's medical director at the Northern Care Alliance. He's a radiologist, senior medical professional who undertakes a number of post-mortems, Dr. Alistair Craig. And I asked him about this incident and explained to him the nature of the injuries and the particular injury to the heart. And I asked him if there's anything anyone could have done to save this poor man who was just out on a night out, who tragically was killed just enjoying a night out with his girlfriend. And Alistair said to me that you wouldn't find a single credible medical professional who would give expert evidence on the fact that any intervention at that point would have made any difference. In fact, he went as far as saying that, in fact, if that stabbing had taken place in a hospital, he thinks that it's almost certain nothing could have been done to save that individual's life. And I think that's really important to say that, because I know from personal experience, I had a girlfriend who hadn't been picking the phone up for 12 hours. I went round to her house and I found her dead on the floor. And I was racked with guilt about that for a long time. And I think it's important. People are working in a restaurant and they're faced with a situation that they're not expecting. And I think it's important in my own very, very small way to convey in a public hearing, given the nature of what's in that statement, that those members of staff could have done nothing to save that person's life. And I felt it was important that I said that in the context of this hearing, because that was a terrible burden for anyone to bear. This is a representation against an interim step of suspension that was imposed. And you will remember, councillors, because it's the same three councillors I noted last time, that we did not oppose the suspension on the last occasion. I've dealt with a number of expedited reviews over the years, and one of the things I always say to my clients when they first make contact with me is that it's important that you work with the police, that you engage positively, you listen to what they have to say. Obviously, if in certain instances where I don't agree with what the police say, I'll point that out, but in general terms, the police can provide positive guidance in these circumstances, and we noted what the police said on the last occasion. And I said to my client, first of all, you need to go. You need to get on a first aid course as soon as you can. And my client and his manager attended the first aid course on Monday. You've seen at pages 38 and 39 the certificates. And he has also booked other members of staff onto first aid courses as soon as they are available. You will also see the statement of Bill Massini. Bill, I work closely with Bill. He's a hugely respected trading standards officer. I frequently work with him when I'm doing appeals. He's about as straight as they come, is Bill, and hugely experienced. And he delivered staff training on Tuesday of this week to all the staff members except the manager who couldn't be there. Because again, the Met at the last hearing raised concerns that there was a lack of understanding about the conditions on the licence, and so my client has taken that positive step as well. And you'll also note from the email that I sent yesterday, because I spoke to my client yesterday about the proposed conditions that have been proposed by the Metropolitan Police Service, and those conditions, broadly speaking, I'll go through those in due course. But one of the things I said to him was, if the suspension is lifted today, those conditions will take effect immediately, as a matter of fact and as a matter of law. And so, accordingly, it's important that you can comply with them straight away. And so he's not quite, the work isn't quite finished yet, which is why I've not been able to produce a letter, but obviously the police can go down, should you be minded to lift the suspension, and check. He's upgraded the hard drive. He's working on camera positions in order that he can be compliant with the conditions that Met have requested. And I suppose the fundamental, there are two fundamental thrusts to my submissions today. Firstly, is the fact that my client has, I would submit, displayed a very positive engagement with the process, and secondly, the Met are asking for these conditions to go on the licence effectively as of next Wednesday. So we are simply inviting you to impose those conditions now as an interim step of suspension. I make no apologies here on behalf of my client. He has a business to run. He has bills to pay. He spent £400,000 on the restaurant. He's got staff to think about. He has taken matters seriously. We didn't oppose the suspension on the last occasion, and he's simply asking, please, if he can open this weekend and be subject to the conditions that the Met are asking for. Now, I'll just make a couple of points because I think it's right that I do. Two of those conditions are not agreed going forward. One I've already amended because he's got a party in this weekend, which not everybody's going to be having a meal. That people will principally be eating, but he's happy to have a condition that they're all sat down and it's wait and waitress service only. So I've modified that, and there's another condition around if the CCTV system goes down, he has to stop selling alcohol unless the police give his consent. Well, the reality is, of course, Murphy's Law is such that, of course, systems like this always go down on a weekend. There'll be no one at the police to give that consent available, and so he'll have to close the weekend. I just don't believe that's proportionate. Well, look, he's agreeing to it now because what we're talking about effectively is, I guess, 4 or 5 days trade. So he's willing to work on that basis, but we don't agree to that long term. But look, I am following this. Whatever the outcome is of today, I'm going to engage with the Metropolitan Police Service in trying to find a way of finding a level of agreement in relation to those conditions. So we've got an agreed position for next Wednesday. But look, my client has, like many people in this situation, this is not a guy who's got a 5,000 capacity nightclub that's got a history of problems. This is an alternative style of operation. This is I'm still happy to characterise it as a restaurant. This is a restaurant, food-led business. Certainly, food is a significant part of the business, without question. That was faced with a wholly unforeseeable situation on a Saturday night, and it's bewildering for operators such as this, the maelstrom that they find themselves in. And he is, without any apologies, absolutely tragic what's happened. some poor guy's out on a night out, and he's been unlawfully killed in desperate circumstances. But my client, I believe, has shown respect for that in an appropriate way, and he simply wants to open up this weekend and continue operating his business going forward. I do acknowledge there were breaches. I mean, a number of these breaches that have been identified occurred around the time of this fatality. So I would invite you respectfully to take that into account. But licensed premises do breach licenses, breach conditions on licenses. It happens. It's not a capital offence. Not every, the vast majority of premises have breaches of licenses that occur from time to time. And of course, that isn't satisfactory. I'm not going to say it is. But to paint this operator as some sort of irresponsible fly-by-night licensed business operator that has no care for his responsibilities is just simply wrong. This is a guy who's had a restaurant over the road in this borough for 21 years. It's not licensed, so it's not coming to your purview at any point. It's been voted the best Persian restaurant recently in London. I know from speaking to people locally, he's very well regarded in the local community. He's opened up a business over the road. He's also been subject, it's right to say, this license is a relic of what the premises was previously, when it was undoubtedly a pub. No question it was a pub before. He's transferred the license over. He's stuck, for want of a better word, with the conditions on there. And of course, he's lawfully required to follow those. But for the Met to characterise my client as somebody who is irresponsible just simply doesn't bear any scrutiny. And to base that around the fact there were some breaches on that night, I don't think he's fair. He's never caused any issues for the police before. It's been acknowledged in at page 42 in the bundle, at paragraph 9, that these premises have never caused any issues whilst he's been in there. And in actual fact, I don't believe this license certainly since 2010 has been on any responsible authorities' radars. So from that point of view, I just make that point about this man and his ability to run a business in a lawful and responsible way. He's not perfect, I accept that, but he has a track record that I would invite you respectfully to take into account. In Kerry Smart's witness statement, she makes an assertion that this premises isn't food-led. I mean, I suppose the word "led" one could connote from that it has to be a majority of sales. I don't accept or agree with that. I'm throwing my experience in the trade into the mix again here, but certainly speaking to anyone I know who's an operator, anything that's around it is ahead of a third of the sales being food. It can be regarded as certainly a food-led business. It's a significant proportion. When you think about what people spend on drink when they're eating, that's something to consider when you evaluate. And so what I've done is I've produced at pages 13 to 15 in the agenda pack. You've got 3 photographs of the kitchen. You've got then a sales report covering roughly about a 3-month period. Might not be quite that actually, but certainly a couple of a sustained period of time that shows that food accounts for I think 36% of the overall turnover. You do include tea and coffee as food, by the way, for the purposes of the calculations in the trade. That's a long-established way of evaluating the split of sales. And there's a menu in there. I mean, that's an extensive menu. It has things, burrata, and this is to suggest these premises are not founded upon food sales is just simply does not bear any objective scrutiny. I'll just make the point. Kerry Smart in her statement said that she saw food being taken over. Well, I spoke to my client about that. Simply this: the kitchen at the Star and Scorpion closes at 10 o'clock. And that was food that was brought from over the road for the staff for them to eat which is that's not unusual in any licensed business to provide food for the staff. It's common in kitchens. There's a staff meal that's cooked up, and so that was why the food was brought from over the road. But I have to very robustly refute any suggestion that this business is not significantly so a food business. Now, in saying that, obviously I've had more time to speak to my client. There are people who go in there for a drink. There are people who enjoy drinking in there and don't feel the need to have a meal. And what's wrong with that? I mean, there's plenty of restaurants where that goes on. There's plenty of restaurants I go in where I don't, on every occasion, have a meal. Because I like the ambience of the place, and I like the look of it, and I like the people that go in there. So it's not it's not a capital offence for people not to eat in a restaurant. It's perfectly normal a lot of the time for people to do that. So that is why my client is resistant to that stipulation being put on his business, because people do enjoy going in there for a drink, but that doesn't mean that this business is not founded upon a significant amount of food sales. And I would submit the evidence that we've provided supports that assertion. So if we could just, forgive me, I'll just go through the conditions. And they are obviously in Kerry Smart's, forgive me, I'm just going to get to that. It's in Kerry Smart's first statement that was provided, which is at page, forgive me, 43 in the agenda pack.
Yeah.
They're all agreed, save for the purposes of an interim step until next Wednesday. They are all agreed, save for number 8, where we've taken out the substantial meal part, just because that is not in accordance with the booking that's been made this weekend that my client wants to honour, partly because he wants to honour it because it's the right thing to do, but of course for commercial reasons. I make no apologies about that. I've said that, and hopefully I've made that point. There is a point of difference about, and I'll say this now, there is a point of difference about the DPS situation. Well, there was a point of difference about the DPS situation. And I said to my client, I don't think he's done anything to warrant him being removed as DPS. But he said to me, I don't know if it constitutes going against my advice. I don't think he does, actually. But I've told him what my view is. He's going to agree to that. He's going to find an alternative DPS. He's getting people trained up to that effect. And if we can fast track the personal license through, then that can take place hopefully within the 21 days that will hopefully be afforded to him next week. I'm not trying to prejudge any of that, but he's accepted that. So he's accepting very much. I will also add, can I just add this? I may have one or two other conditions to suggest, and I'm going to be speaking to environmental health because I know that they've made a representation. I emailed them yesterday. So there are still discussions to be had, and I'm not trying to in any way foreshadow what's going to be said next Wednesday. That's a completely, but I'm here today just to try and get my client's business open again on the basis of these steps being imposed in lieu of the suspension. And so those are my submissions. I'll just reiterate. I believe my client has been he's been thrust into a situation that was completely unforeseeable. He has taken on board what the police have said. He's taken positive steps. He is deeply troubled by what's happened, but he's got a business to run as any other licensed business does. And he's just simply asking you, on the basis of all that, on the basis of all the steps he's taken and demonstrated actively, and the engagement that there's been with the police, he's asking you if that suspension can be lifted, please, and that he can trade this weekend, and then we can come back here on Wednesday and obviously deal with the license going forward. And so those are my submissions. Obviously, happy to answer any questions that anyone will have. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Mr. Guyer, you might just want to introduce yourself. Do you have any questions to Mr. Craig?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, right. Do we have anybody, obviously you're speaking on behalf of the police, questions from councillors? Councillor Ball?
No, thanks at this stage, Chair.
Yeah. And Councillor Jammu?
Thank you, Chair. It's more a statement than a question, actually, to Mr. Craig. I've heard everything that you've said, but I somehow, I understand you spoke with your brother, who's Dr. Alistair Craig, and I understand. I heard your views on that one as well. But the fact is that a man was stabbed, in the premises on that night. And, that is the basis of this whole thing. So, I find it hard to believe, some of the stuff that you said.
Well, let me ask you this.
Hang on a second. Sorry, because obviously we don't want to go down rabbit holes here. Try and phrase it as a question, obviously, to give Mr. Craig an opportunity to respond, and Mr. Mohammed, so what is it, what was it you'd like to understand from Mr. Craig, Councillor Jammu?
Like I said, it's not a question, it was more a statement.
Okay.
Well,
really
I feel I need to respond to that.
Just, Mr. Craig, just hold it. You'll get an opportunity later. You know what I mean? But just, we can park it for the time being. I'm sure it will come up in the other lines of questioning. Yeah, if that's okay. Just jot it down, so to speak. Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. There's no question of clarification there. Really. So I'd like to go to the police to present their case. Mr. Guyer.
Thank you. The progress of this review has followed a familiar path, and that is that there was a violent incident. In this case, it was a fatal stabbing, which triggered a summary review. And that review, one has to remember, is of the license as a whole. It is not simply a review of what happened that night. The review that is to take place next Wednesday is of the license. And in preparation for next Wednesday's hearing, the police, or rather, there has come to the surface a number of serious concerns. They will be looked at in some detail next Wednesday, but for the purposes of today's hearing and decision, I'm just going to focus on three of them. Firstly, there was what I suggest can only be described as a wholesale disregard of various licensing conditions. They are in PC Smart's second statement in the supplementary bundle, which begins on page 41. The breaches of license condition begin on page 42. I'm not going to read them out, but because this is a public meeting and others may not have the documentation in front of them, I will very briefly summarize what those breaches were. They arose between the hours of 11 o'clock and more or less 12 o'clock at night. That is the compass of the video that PC Smart viewed. So what we're looking at is a window of just short of an hour. And within that small time frame, PC Smart saw customers being allowed to enter and re-enter after 11 o'clock, which is in breach of condition 8. She counted some 87 breaches of that condition. She saw customers who were allowed to leave with opened bottles and glasses. That's in breach of condition 9. She saw customers who were allowed to smoke on the pavement, which isn't a designated smoking area. That's in breach of condition 21. She saw customers standing on the pavement drinking after 11 o'clock. That's in breach of condition 28. And she saw the staff failing to remove alcohol from outside the premises after 11 o'clock, which is in breach of condition 29. Some colour is added to those breaches in her further statement, which is on page 46 of the bundle. And I just summarise it very briefly. She saw customers being allowed to smoke, drink, and dance on the pavement. Secondly, there is concern about a wholly inadequate response to a man who was stabbed and was lying wounded, bleeding on the floor. I respectfully suggest it is immaterial whether after the event it can be analysed as a situation they could do nothing to save the man's life. The concern is that they didn't attempt to do anything other than standing behind the bar, handing over sheets of kitchen roll to others who were trying to look after the dying man. There is also concern, under the same head of inadequate response, of the failure to call the police. The London Ambulance Service was called at 5 to 12 by a member of the public. The London Ambulance Service notified the police, and the police arrived at 1 minute 43 seconds past midnight. And those instructing me can find no record of an attempt to call the police other than an aborted attempt that was made, but the phone put down at about the time that the police were arriving. In relation to the inadequate response to help the man, it is, again, immaterial whether this was a deliberate act of violence. The response would have been just as inadequate if it had been an accident. Thirdly, and finally, in this summary, and there is more, I emphasize, that will be discussed next Wednesday, but for the purposes of consideration whether to lift the suspension. The police are concerned about something that has come to light from the noise and nuisance team's representation. That's going to be considered next Wednesday, but this aspect of it I do raise now, that there is a suggestion, which is worrying, of the staff turning down the volume of loud music when the noise team was present, but turning it up again the moment the noise team.
So I'm not sure what happened there. There was some carry on, Mr. Graham.
One of these things, turning it, forgive me, up again when the noise team left. I raise it because it is consonant with the police's concern about the management and staff of these premises. At the interim steps hearing, as you know, on the 29th of July, the licensee didn't resist the suspension pending review. He now asks for that suspension to be lifted 5 days before the review. The police position is that there is every good reason to stand by the decision of the 29th of July and not lift the suspension. And I can put it, I think, briefly, no better than this. If the premises were allowed to reopen tonight or this weekend, it would be under the same management as those who were responsible for the wholesale breaches of condition on the 27th of July, the same management that allowed customers to drink, smoke and dance on the pavement, and I have to repeat it, whose response to a stabbing that proved fatal was to pass kitchen roll over the counter. There has been some training of some staff, but I respectfully suggest nothing like enough to give confidence that these premises can safely open. I'm going to finish with this because the conditions that were mentioned by PC Smart have been mentioned by Mr. Craig and gone through in a little detail. PC Smart's representation, as you will have read, says that the police have no confidence in the DPS and the management. A number of conditions, however, were proposed, but I want to make it clear that it is not the police position that those conditions are an answer to the police's concerns. To put it bluntly, breaches of condition, particularly breaches on this scale, are not answered by yet more conditions. The police are saying, in my language, this: if and when, and it may be a big if, these premises are allowed to reopen because the licensing subcommittee is satisfied that the Star and Scorpion has put its house in order. If and when the premises reopen, it should be under a license that has tighter conditions than at present. That's the beginning and end of PC Smart's suggestion as to additional conditions. They are not a solution to the problem that arose on the 27th of July. Without repeating myself, that is all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greer. Have you brought any witnesses? Obviously, you've got the police here with you. Who you can...
The PC Smart is here as a better person to answer questions possibly than I, should any arise.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Craig, questions to Mr. Greer in response?
I don't have it. I will respond to what Mr. Gouria said when I close, but I don't have any questions now. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Councillors, Councillor Jamu, do you have any questions to Mr. Gouria?
No questions, Chair.
That's good. Thank you, Councillor Ball.
Yeah, no questions either, Chair.
That's good. Well, thank you very much. So really, it's just for the representations to sum up. I mean, yeah. So, given obviously it's so to speak with the application will go last. So do you want to add anything now at this point, Mr. Gouria? Because obviously the right to reply will go to Mr. Craig, so to speak.
Yeah, yes, you've identified, sir, that in this case, I've only just spoken and there's no need for me to say anything more. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right, no problem. Mr. Craig, so really it's a question of summing up, and obviously you can respond to any of the matters raised by, say, the councillors and the police and Mr. Gouria.
Yeah, I don't think the fact that nothing could be done to save that person's life would be immaterial to the members of staff that were there. I think that was a unfortunate turn of phrase given the circumstances, but there we are. The failure to call 999, and I'm sorry I didn't identify this in my submissions. Actually, I have provided a screenshot at page 37 of a call that was made, that I think 23:55. Bear with me, please. My printer is broken at home. I'm having to do it all on my iPad, which is not ideal. Forgive me. It's contained in there. Forgive me, at page 37. Is it 37? 3746. I've got the number for that phone. Forgive me. I'm not going to read it out. It's public hearing. I don't think it's appropriate that I do, but I do have the number, and it was a gentleman called Taylor. So that was at 23:53. He just couldn't get through. I did say that at the last hearing. I'm sorry I didn't take everybody to that. That was my oversight on my part. So apologies for that. So we don't accept that. I don't know how you allow people to dance, by the way, on the street. I don't know how that works. But anyway, that's again a matter of semantics, I guess. The position is this: the Metropolitan Police Service have suggested a number of conditions. They wouldn't be in there if that wasn't the steps that they were steering you towards. They've unilaterally provided those conditions as appropriate and they see them as appropriate going forward from next Wednesday. We are, what's that, 5 days away from that. And so that's why I'm here today. I'm just inviting you. Really, it's down to what I have to respond to Councillor Jamu. Yeah, somebody has died, and that is tragic. But you're going to be faced with a decision next Wednesday about what to do with these premises, and if that's going to be your attitude next Wednesday, I've got grave concerns about how you're going to respond to the submissions that I'll be making on that basis, because you're going to be invited by me to continue with the license 5 days after you've made that statement. I'll just make that point now. And I would just ask everybody to try, I suppose, if you're on a jury, to look at this in a dispassionate way as you possibly can, that the world doesn't stop turning when things like this happen. I know that from personal experience. I've lost a number of people that are close to me in recent years, a brother, a sister, and a girlfriend, but the world keeps turning around when those things happen. And my client is just trying, when he's been faced with such a dreadful thing happening in his premises, and just try and imagine how that must feel for somebody to have that happen in your business. Somebody's murdered inside your business. So please have some empathy for my client in all this. He's just simply trying to get on with his life. He's respected the proceedings. He's respected what's happened. He hasn't even opened the business up. He could have done that without a license. He could have invited people to bring their own alcohol. He's not done that. He's respected the proceedings. He's respected what's happened. And he's just simply asking you, please, can he open this weekend in order that he can try and get on with his life as best he can. And so for that reason, I'm just please asking you on his behalf to lift the suspension, impose the conditions, and allow me the rest of the time to work alongside the Met as best as possible, and environmental health. And by the way, environmental health, that evidence isn't before you today, because what we're dealing with here is an application between the license holder and the Met. So I don't believe, respectfully, you can take that into account. Just inviting you, please, to lift this suspension and allow my client to open this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. I believe that's it, unless councillors have got any questions.
I don't think there are any other matters, Chair.
I beg, but yeah, it was,
Okay.
and Alison, sorry.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Yes, I think you've covered.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Okay, it's 11:11. I'm sure there's some superstition around that number, but I would recommend that we are able to return at 12 o'clock noon, midday. So if you all want to sort of come back to the room at 5 to 12, I'm confident that we'll be ready then to give our decision. But we'll obviously reserve the right to take longer should we need to. So yes, we'll see you at 12 o'clock.
Can I just ask this? What do I have to do now? Do I leave and rejoin, or just stay on? And
You'll be exited by the room by you.